Kaveel Singh, News 24 journalist who joins us live now. Thank you so much, Kaveel, for your time this afternoon. I mean, when one looks at what has been happening since July last year, it's also quite strange that we've seen no significant arrests made when it comes to some of the alleged instigators.
Yes, I mean, thank you so much for having me, and hi to your viewers. I think that, it's also quite telling that 1 year into the anniversary or commemoration of the unrest, that it was really the first time that the sort of security cluster really sat down and addressed the public on the arrests, on the investigations. And even though that did happen, there still appears to be a slow pace at which this is working. I mean, just to give you an indication, 6 months ago at the Human Rights Commission, Hawks head, Mr. Godfrey Libya, said that he couldn't really give too much information. Yesterday, he did speak to journalists at News 24, and he explained that in terms of the architects, there were very sort of complicated investigations, and that they were planning to investigate them in a group. And he explained that they weren't really making arrests until individual investigations were completed. So it has been quite a tedious process. And I mean, just looking at the visuals that you played before you've come to me, I mean, this week I also spoke to quite a few people in Zwelisha. I spoke to one of the community leaders, Mr. Nkosi Mshlongo, and he said that the government sort of rhetoric of social cohesion isn't really playing out on the ground, and that families feel that a year later, when there were so many sort of obvious crimes committed, particularly in Phoenix, and I mean other parts of the city and the country, the community just doesn't have that confidence in the security cluster, in policing, and they feel that they've really been done down. And there's still a lot of very intense tensions between these communities that are very, very close to each other in proximity.
And they talk about even some of the cases that are still being investigated when we were listening to Defense Minister, for example, on Friday. But one of the other things that's, really struck a chord with me on Friday when I was listening to the briefing was that there's now talk of an unrest. Yet last year we were hearing failed insurrection. We were hearing quite a lot being thrown about when it comes to what exactly did we witness last year. I wonder if really, it's just as confusing for you as it is for me this afternoon to say what exactly was happening, because no one is talking about that failed insurrection anymore.
Sure. I mean, on the 16th of July, 2021, when the president eventually, 8 days after all of this started, touched on with a massive security detail after everything had calmed down, he had a lot to say. He said that the instigators were in the crosshairs. He said that there were investigations that were continuing, and that he gave assurances to the public that the security cluster, that the police, the intelligence services were really working on this. But a year later, this past week, I'm sure many SABC journalists like myself went to a lot of the places that we visited last year during the unrest. And upon reflection, really, communities, individuals, people just aren't feeling like they're being heard. They don't feel like leadership is really changed that much over the last year, particularly in Durban. If you also look at the other tragedies that have unfolded, like the flooding, the sort of inaction and the slow movement of our government officials, really, people are extremely unhappy on the ground.
And one of the things that we also saw as well was that I remember reading that July Unrest report. It was talking about the difficulties between SAPS, members themselves, in fact, when it comes to management. But another interesting part is the failure of crime intelligence to also detect this. And a year on, we're still none the wiser about how ready the state is should we see any possible threats, despite the defense minister saying that they will do whatever they can.
I think you're 100% correct. And I think we can see that factional fighting in the ANC really spilled into the streets of South Africa during that period of time. And really, 1 year later, factional fighting is still a massive issue in the ruling party. I mean, in terms of crime intelligence, I think that if you look at, in terms of the erosion of crime intelligence and the erosion of the SAPs, we've got 100 million rand budget in the police. Crime intelligence has really come under fire for abuse of their slush fund, abuse of their resources. And it appeared that during that period of time when the unrest occurred in July 2021, that while there were some intelligence reports, there wasn't really a lot of action on the ground. I mean, there were some indications. I mean, if we're talking about a former president being arrested, surely there should have been some galvanizing. It was something that was unprecedented. You know, there should have been perhaps more preparation, but we didn't really see that at all.
Especially when you even talk about that, Unrest report, which also looks at the, Human Rights Commission's probe. So certainly quite a lot of action is going to, need to be seen here in order to see, for the country to see that there is, in fact, some kind of action to these recommendations. But let's leave it there with you for now. Thank you so much, Kaveel, for your time. That is Kaveel Singh, News 24 journalist.